a culmination of experiences, I think, that had brought me to this point where I was like, I think my life is probably going to be different now.
Welcome to Dusty Sandals, where each week we chat with one person who's walked with Jesus and has a story to tell. This week we're with Ryan Starrett. How you going, Ryan?
Good, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you here, mate. We're so keen to get into your story. You've been walking with God for how many years now? Is it sort of like 15, I'm guessing?
Yeah, probably about that. And a gradual kind of journey. Yeah, 12, 15.
Yeah, cool.
I'm guessing now.
All right, so where did it all kind of begin for you? When you look back on you and God, where did you first meet? Where did it happen? Interestingly
enough, I come from a complete non-Christian background, so I didn't grow up in the church or anything like that. So quite a secular upbringing, but at the same time, some people are often surprised to find that I did go to Sunday school as a kid in the Uniting Church.
Right.
When I was really, really young, both my grandparents were pretty involved in the Methodist church.
I was going to ask if it was a grandparent thing. It's often the case, the grandparents...
Not with parents, but my grandparents used to take my brother and I along. They'd pick us up, we'd go along. I still remember the hall, I remember the hymns. Well, maybe not the words, but at least my grandfather's voice. And yeah, eventually I think it got to a point, I don't remember, but apparently my brother and I told my mum and dad that, we don't really want to go anymore. I think there was no one young. We were kind of, I don't know, wanting to go play soccer on the weekends, or who knows what was going on. Yeah. But the age I'm talking is young. We stopped 5, 6, 7, I don't know. We're quite small.
Okay.
But I eventually changed schools and started going to an Adventist school.
Okay.
In, I don't know, around the year 2000, 2001. And I probably went to an Adventist school for a few years where, naturally you encountered Jesus through classes, through chapels and all this kind of stuff. But I would say nothing was really... I was kind of a very passive, I was surrounded by it but not buying into it. Not that I was consciously not buying into it. I wasn't even thinking about it at all.
Yeah. And
it wasn't until probably I'd been to school, an Adventist school, for about maybe 3 years. I developed a close friendship with a couple of Adventists, but then also I eventually decided to go to a summer camp. And I started...
Tell us about summer camps. What's a summer camp?
Summer camps in North New South Wales, this was. So up at Yarrahappini, you're in cabins for a week nearly, with a few... a handful of other guys in your cabin. There's I don't know how many people are there, 100 or more. You have a worship in the morning. You go and do activities like surfing, mountain biking, rock climbing, fishing, boat activities. So you do a whole bunch of fun stuff in the day, have lunch, more stuff in the afternoon, and then in the evening you have a bit of a worship service as well. And there's always a key speaker for the week who just delivers a message on some topic or theme. And that was my first real encounter, going to a summer camp and actually, I guess, a more constant exposure. Rather at school you can kind of come in, go, and you can kind of just tune out.
Yeah. But
going to a summer camp, I think I originally went because I was fun, my friends are going to be there. And then I clearly do remember one night, the speaker, I think it was Troy Lane, I think, was speaking that year. And I remember just during the songs, I just remember having this flooding thought, all of this almost not a panic, but all this emotion kind of coming over. I was like, man, I know, am I having a paradigm shift right now? I've never really thought of, and all of a sudden I'm I don't know, I think I'm buying into this, and I've not bought into anything like this ever, really.
Wow.
And I remember actually during the song service at one point, I remember just being I think I just need to go get some fresh air outside, because this is I felt pretty overwhelmed in the moment and feeling even a bit lightheaded. And I was like, man, this is pretty crazy. And it was it wasn't anything I recall the message being about or any particular song. It was just a culmination of experiences, I think, that had brought me to this point where I was like, I think my life is probably going to be different now, because I feel I know, I dig this. I'm buying into this. This is...
Okay.
I think my life is kind of changing trajectory a bit.
How old were you at that point?
I would have been, I'm going to say 13, maybe.
Yeah, right.
Maybe 14, 13, 14, around that.
Yep.
I think I missed out on summer camp at the end of year 6 going into year 7, and I was really bummed about that. And then the next year, I think it was end of year 7 maybe, I applied to go to summer camps, and I actually applied too late. I missed out, and then I got a call like 2 days before summer camps, that for whatever teen camp it was that I'd applied for. I got a call like 2 days earlier, and it's like, hey, we've got a spot open up. Do you want to come? And I was like so devo, because like all my friends are going to summer camp. Not all, but like a few key friends were.
Mm-hmm.
And I was missing out again for like the second year in a row. And then I remember got that call, and I remember talking to mum and dad about it, and I thought they weren't going to let me. We always had camping, Christmas, family plans around that time of year. But they said, listen, like it costs this much for this many days. Like we'd probably spend as much or more money taking you on this other holiday that we were going to have. How about, sure, you can go. Do you want to go? Like it makes sense for us. Like we're not, because I felt bad asking my parents to spend money on me. And so to me, I thought, this is a bit of a cost. Like I don't want to burden them with this. I was mindful of that even at that age. But no, they were like, listen, don't worry about that. It's not a big deal.
That's cool.
It's actually cheaper for us probably if you do go.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
So I was like, sweet. And I went.
So what happens after that? You go there, you kind of buy into God, and you feel like things are going to be different. Were they different after that point?
I feel like, gradually you come back from that experience. And like with those kind of things, particularly as a teen, I feel like people often experience highs around those times, and they come back and it's like, oh, this is real life. Yeah. And then you come to the next thing, it's like a bit of a high again. And it might have been a slight bit of a roller coaster. It wasn't too like extreme though. I feel like I came back and I was like, I feel like I was definitely more conscious of everything in the sense of like when it was chapel time, you're actually kind of like listening and trying to like learn more.
Right.
I came back, and Tony Piscini was like a student missionary at the time from America, who was at our school, and I organised Bible studies with him and one of my other friends, Blair. We kind of started doing like a Bible study together with him, and that was good. So I came back, started having Bible studies, and then I started, and particularly with Blair, we spent a lot of time together on the weekends. I was going over his house quite a lot, and so my friend Blair and his dad Mel were like, they really like, I guess, took me in.
Because that was a full-on Christian family, right?
Yeah.
I know those guys.
Mel Lemke, pastor, big mentor figure in my life, and in those years, he, I think I've still got a key to his house and my key ring. He doesn't live in that house anymore, but I've still got a key. And I was just over there all the time. Obviously, like good people and good family, but like more than that, probably in terms of, like for me, the role they played in my journey was big, I guess. I don't think I'd probably be here without that.
Wow.
Just I was there all the time.
What was different about their family compared with any other family that you might have hung out with?
I guess just the perspective on life and, spiritual focus, the kind of conversations you have, the other people that you're surrounding yourself with, just naturally because of the choices you've been making, you're with much more like-minded people. And I feel like there was a lot of, I guess, wisdom and knowledge in Mel, who was, I don't know, and just the way that he conducted himself was like, I was like, this it was definitely rubbing off on me for sure.
Yeah,
just gradually over years, and then every big camp after that summer camp, I think I went and stayed with Mel and Blair. I would go to big camp with them because my family obviously didn't. So if you're like someone like me who was like, I guess, an outsider, if you're going to big camp, like particularly, and you're not old enough to like be an adult and sort it out yourself, you had to go with someone. You had to attach.
Yeah. Now, before you go on with that one, tell us about big camp. For anyone who wasn't watching last week's episode, where we defined what big camp is for people who don't know about it, how would you describe big camp?
Big camp is a big camp. It is it is massive. And again, every state conference has their own version or iteration of big camp. But for me, it was up in North New South Wales. You've got I don't know, 3,000 people, 4,000 people camping out on the same property for like a week. I think it was even 9 days up there. I'm not sure what it is now, but it was long. It was over a week, and on the Sabbath, on Saturdays, you'd have like 6,000 people there, because people who couldn't stay throughout the whole thing for work would come up for the weekend. So I think by the weekends it was like 6,000 or more people there.
That's huge.
And you'd have different tents every night, where there'd be like a message with a key speaker who stayed with that tent. And there would be a few more other things throughout the day, particularly for different age groups, to cater to different needs for young kids or teens, or and random Bible studies would be happening. But apart from that, just a lot of hanging out, playing sport. For me, it was just surfing most days up there, or going to play paintball at the local paintball place.
Yeah, nice.
Just with a whole bunch of your friends, like everyone was there.
Yep.
And then a whole bunch of new friends that you'd obviously make.
Cool.
So big camp was just like probably for a lot of people like the high of the year, in the sense of like it was the thing that people just like look forward to.
Yep.
So I, just went with Blair and Mel, and I stayed with them every year after for the next however many years. And even once I was at college studying I don't think I actually ever went, and I think I've only ever been to stay with them.
Right.
So
okay.
I haven't been to a North New South Wales big camp for a number of years now. But
yeah, you're in Victoria now.
Yeah. So for ages, stayed with them. And
so it sounds like you jumped into the deep end with God. You have this family that's a solid Christian giant family, and they take you through. How does your life change in that period of time? Does it change at all? Do you feel your character changing?
Yeah, for sure. Character changing. Like, you can't help but, like, I guess approach things from a different mindset. Like, I know, I feel like, I know, and this may not be true, but let's just make it up, because, no one else here can say otherwise. I feel like as like a young teenager and stuff like that, like, I know, I feel like I was probably not the type to be getting up to too much of like mischief, or like the kind of path that I was on was like even though my parents weren't Christian parents, I still had like a very almost Christian-like upbringing, in the sense like, and like my family's like, everyone's just got like hearts of gold, like really loving, caring family that it's weird, almost like possesses full Christian sets of values.
Yeah, right.
But maybe just without the beliefs at all. And so like, even it's really weird, like, and even saying it now, it surprises me so much. Like, I used to say prayer before dinner and before going to bed.
Okay.
Non-Christian family.
Yeah, right.
But like, I still remember like these rote learned prayers that you would say like with mum or dad, whoever, before you went to sleep or before you had tea. And for a non-Christian family, like, why? I don't know. Like, so there was certain elements that just must have trickled through that, I don't know. So I feel like, but my life definitely changed around that point. I feel like you become more conscious and aware of how you're interacting with people, and even my approach to my parents, and just, I guess, I don't know, I feel like certain values, I kind of wanted people as well to kind of know that I was like seeing things from a different perspective, I guess. So you kind of felt like, I want people to know that I'm not the same person. Like so I guess the way that you conduct yourself is a bit different as well.
Yeah.
And that had its hiccups. Like, I remember, later during school, I started going to church, either, with like Blair or my other friends, like in the area. We had a good group of friends, about 5 or 6 of us males, who were all really close, and every weekend we're at one of their houses.
Right.
Like, I've only mentioned one family so far, but it was more than that. There was a collective group of us, and on a Saturday I wanted to go to church now.
Yep.
And before I had a license, I'd have to organise to stay Friday night somewhere at someone's house, do church on Saturday, and then hopefully get picked up Saturday afternoon, or sometimes I'd even just stay the whole weekend almost, if I didn't have sport commitments on. But that became complex as I went on, and maybe mum wanted me to be at home studying for my HSC on a Saturday, but I'm like, but I don't want to study on a Saturday. Like, I want to go to church, And even if I'm not going to church, I don't want to be at home studying, and trying to have those conversations at home, getting, like a parent to kind of see that your mindset has changed, and trying to get them to understand your decisions and why you've made them and what it actually means.
Yeah, and especially as a Seventh-day Adventist, you didn't buy into just any flavour of Christianity. You went for one where we're very specific as Adventists in following God's call to just take a 24-hour period aside on Friday night to Saturday night, where we don't work, we don't study. We kind of just separate that as a space for God and to build our relationships. I mean, how did your family kind of reconcile with all that?
Yeah, it was kind of, I would say it was a little bit, it had its challenges. It was not smooth necessarily. My mum was definitely known amongst a number of my brother and my friends as we'd get on holidays and, my brother and I would have a massive checklist of jobs that we had to do. I'd had friends over before with a checklist of jobs. I'd decobweb the house, do this, do that. And I've got a friend over.
Wow.
So I feel like Mum kind of cracked the whip over household stuff a lot, to the point where she was probably renowned for it amongst a number of our friends.
Okay.
And so, Saturdays was it was basically spring cleaning every Saturday. But now I'm not saying I don't want to spring clean. It's not like I don't want to help around the house. I'm not trying to be disrespectful to you. I don't want to study. I don't want to clean. But I'm not being rebellious, and I'm not using this to get out of things.
Yeah.
And it was tough. And I remember having some conversations, and I think words to the effect of God can wait, your HSC can't, I think were uttered at some point in a discussion. And I kind of look back and it's funny now, but it definitely had its challenges. And I think even up until the end of me finishing school, because you want to be respectful to your parents, you want to be helpful, and you kind of want to, I wanted to please them. But at the same time, I saw things from a different perspective now, and I wanted to kind of live by that, honour that, and also there was probably an element too where it wasn't just about not doing things at home, but it's I also felt like I was kind of, a big part of my life was with my group of friends, growing together and growing those friendships. And I feel I know that you had a bit of FOMO as well, because you're if I'm not going to church, then that means I'm not staying here on a Friday night.
Yeah.
And I guess I was missing out on all those experiences with some of my other friends and some of their families, and that, where I guess I'd become accustomed to, I guess that was how you do things.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, I'd then just stay at home and not want to do these things, but I wasn't allowed to go anywhere. And anyway.
I get it.
Challenges.
It sounds like an actual lifestyle change that you experienced. It wasn't just some people talk about Christianity and think about Christianity as it's just something that you do. Once a week, you go to a place, you sit down, you listen to some stuff, maybe you sing some songs, and that's kind of it. Whereas you're describing a lifestyle change where every aspect of your life seems to have been influenced and impacted by this decision to accept God in your life, right?
And particularly just to buy into all those out of school activities, which were, whether it's youth rallies or church or whatever event was happening on Friday night or a Saturday. Usually, I lived half an hour. I lived down on the Central Coast, and all my friends were half an hour further north. And so I was kind of a bit physically isolated. So for me, it wasn't a matter of, I can't go just around the corner. It's it was such a big effort to actually get to those places to do those things as someone who can't drive themselves. So I was actually relying for a while. You're relying on mum or on dad, and I feel like it was probably largely mum. You're relying on them to be happy to drive an hour to drop you off.
Yeah.
And it might have been not a great car conversation, because you've kind of you're having those clashes of what you want out of your Saturday.
Yep.
And then I'm on the other end of the weekend saying, hey, can you pick me up now? So it's kind of like, yeah, it was definitely because I actually had to really commit time-wise and effort-wise to make it happen.
For sure.
To kind of pursue that. And I feel if I was at home, I feel like in some ways I feel like I was being held back from being able to really pursue that journey, because I'm like, well, if I'm just at home, I'm going to be forced to do a bunch of things that I didn't want to do necessarily on a Saturday. But I can't necessarily just go off by myself. So it's
kind of like, it sounds like it was a logistics challenge as much as,
sure.
Yeah.
As much as like a beliefs clash.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So I want to learn about some other aspects of your life. I know that you're super into sport. Mm-hmm. Physical activity, basketball especially, seems to come across a lot in your, in your daily activity. Mm-hmm. You got quite into that side of things for a while there.
Sure.
I think basketball, you were super, super committed. Yeah. How did God kind of like factor in, and how did you kind of work that around? Because you've been talking about Sabbath. How did you work around that with all your sports stuff? Because Saturday is the big sports day usually, isn't it?
Well, that's the thing for me. Basketball growing up was huge, and Friday night basketball was like, from like year 2 onwards, was like, that's kind of how I learned to play basketball, and my main engagement with it was on a Friday night. Oh, yeah. And then I got more and more into basketball when I was playing more and more seriously and making more and more commitments, and I was eventually playing like, I think I had commitments every single weekday almost, maybe like one day off. And then on the weekend as well, you'd have commitments. Wow. And some of those commitments would be, like on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I would have training at 5:36 in the morning in Gosford. So it was like a 45-minute drive south of where I lived to get to training by 6 in the morning. I'd train all morning. And then to drive from Gosford up to Currumbong, where I went to school, that's like an hour and a bit.
So this is your mum or your dad?
So mum would drop me at basketball.
Yeah.
I'd train in the morning. She'd, I guess, wait in the car park. I don't even know what mum did, but she's not going back home because it's such a drive.
Yeah.
But then I have to drive all the way up past home again, half an hour north again to Currumbong.
Yeah.
And then she'd have to drive back. And so I'd get to school late pretty much most Tuesdays and Thursdays. But then Tuesday night I'd also have basketball in Currumbong. Thursday afternoon I'd have basketball training after school, at school, and then I'd go back down to Gosford Thursday night to play men's comp.
That's insane.
Then I had other trainings and commitments as well. Like I would probably have at least 10 commitments a week, and it was massive. But the good thing for me, I found particularly once my life, once I started to want to go to church on Saturdays and not have those kind of commitments, I was really lucky in the sense that in New South Wales, pretty much all my commitments were on a Sunday. Right. So Saturday was usually the only Saturdays that ever came up were like weekend tournaments where I went for the whole weekend. I remember one year I had trainings on a Friday night, and I'd stopped Friday night basketball for a number of years around this point, so I wasn't really doing Friday nights anymore. I was doing other nights of the week. But yeah, I remember one year I did have trainings that were on a Friday night, and I think timing of how it worked up there was fairly lucky, just with when the season works. So it didn't really, sometimes I was leaving trainings on a Friday night, kind of around sunset time. And so I feel like I largely escaped a lot of that. We're down here in Victoria, a lot of it is Saturdays, and I feel like it would have been a different experience for me. Yeah. So I feel like I never really had to make those big decisions around sport. I feel like I was really lucky that Saturday kind of got missed.
Nice. Yeah.
But yeah, it was a huge part of my life for a long period of time. I do remember one big camp, actually. I was at even though there's main keynote speakers in the evening, there were other Bible studies you could get plugged into, and I was going to one, and it was looking at identity, basically. And I do remember I've got one piece of paper in one of my Bibles. It's like a tall, skinny Bible, my first Bible I bought myself. and I've got one piece of paper in it, and it's the one from the big camp that I'm about to refer to, and it was basically on identity and this like, you know, like, and it asked like a few key questions on it. I wish I'd remembered. I could have brought along, but and basically those questions really honed in on like, where do you get your value from? Where do you get your meaning from? And I probably would have been about 16, 17 when I kind of realized and came to the conclusion, pretty much in those Bible studies, like, man, I care way too much about this. Like, this dictates so much of my mood and my happiness. Like, am I making this team? Am I getting to that level? How many minutes am I getting? It was all that numbers. Like, how many minutes am I getting on the court? Like, what are my stats? Like, and it's not that I cared so much about the stats themselves, but it was more like proving worth to your team, proving worth to your coach to try and make that next thing. And it was a lot. I realized how much I'd just been chasing that at the expense of other things, and it maybe wasn't too healthy.
Yeah.
And I feel like I definitely kind of pumped off the brakes at that point. I'd always wanted to fully pursue a career, like playing
pro basketball.
Yeah, that was the dream. I'd go and watch the Sydney Kings down in Sydney at the entertainment centre, and I always watched at the time in a weird kind of perspective, thinking, "Oh yeah, I'll be doing this one day." Like that's, and I had, in my mind, I was like, "Yeah, why not? Like,
yeah,
this should be my goal. I'm going to aim for it." And I don't know, but yeah, it was probably around that time, age 16, 17, that I think reassessed that and thought, if I'm chasing that for my life, I don't know how fulfilling it's going to be.
Yeah,
like I'm constantly. It's just going to be chasing one thing after another, and you will never feel that kind of contentment. I think I kind of realised that at that big camp. So I still had lots of commitments, still played lots, but I guess my perspective towards it had changed a bit, and what I wanted out of it, and probably since then, I guess gradually kind of backed off in a number of commitments. But
how do you describe the place where you get your self-worth from these days?
Yeah, that's a good question. Like. Yeah, like I feel like you get it from like a lot of different places. I feel like, and some of those places I don't know, you should be seeking it from, but we're human, we kind of do. And so like, I feel like I definitely get some self-worth from, I don't know, I like to be good at things. I like to do stuff and be good at things.
Yep.
And I feel like you can't help but take some sort of self-worth from that, even if it's not what you're intending for. But I feel like that's like a weakness that I had then, and I feel like you shake off, but then it kind of takes new forms in your life later on.
Yeah.
And you might have convinced yourself, I don't really care about that anymore, but then like it's just become something else.
Yeah.
And so I feel like there are still hallmarks in my life of that kind of stuff, where like materialistic, silly things that I know I like to be able to do stuff and do it well. If I've got a problem at home, or if I need to make something, I like to be able to just do it and fix it. And I kind of, this makes me feel good.
Yeah, I can relate to that for sure.
And that plays in, and it shouldn't really, ultimately. But it still kind of does. But yeah, that's kind of like, I feel like that's a constant battle for me. It's like not get worth from those things, but just more identity in, you know, who I am as a person, beliefs, relationship with God. That should be the sole thing that we kind of get that identity from. And I kind of look a little bit on sometimes at people who I feel like, oh, they've really got that sorted. You're kind of a bit envious.
Yeah.
But then like, you can't just like switch it on, like, and like act it out. Like, you kind of, I don't know, how do you get to that place?
Yeah.
Because you can't just like start doing it and like, I know, you feel like a fraud if you just like.
It's not a fake it till you make it thing either. It's like, it's a journey.
It's a journey.
Yeah, it's a spectrum.
Yeah, so I don't know. It'd be good to get to there, and that's like completely where you're at.
Yeah.
But there's just...
Well, good luck with that.
I feel there's always so many tangents along the way.
Yeah.
We're so weak.
Tell me about purpose. Like, did God give you a sense of what your purpose is in life at any point along that journey? Or what do you sense now is your purpose?
Yeah, I feel like along the way, you pray for things, like for direction, and often we ask for like, God, I want these things in my life. You want a whole bunch of yeses.
Yeah.
But I feel like for God, there was like often he kind of, the no's are probably what he kind of gets through to you maybe more strongly than the yeses when you want certain things and he says no. And I had plans when I finished school, gap year, get some work, go do summer camps in America. That was kind of a bit of a plan, and then come back and do something in like sports science and kind of, pursue something in that field. But then I was being a staff member at summer camps. After I stopped being a camper, I started being a staff member for a number of years. And I remember kind of getting around to the end of January, and I'm like, I haven't got work lined up. I haven't locked in everything to do summer camps in America, and you've been aiming for all these things, but just nothing was kind of like going. And I prayed about it, and I thought, like, what am I doing? Like, I know what I'm like as a person, and with this kind of stuff, I could very easily find myself into like February, March with no job, and not in like a uni course at all either. And I'm just doing nothing. I'm like, I can't get to that place. Like, God, like, steer me in a bit of a direction here. And so I never actually applied for any unis or anything. Like at the end of year 12, like normally you do that.
Yeah.
I didn't even do it because I had no intentions of studying straight after.
Yep.
But in the end, I finished summer camps, and I feel like God lined up a few things. And before I knew it, I was kind of like having interviews at college up at Avondale with a couple of lecturers and just talking about like what course I was going to do, basically.
Right. Yeah.
And originally it was kind of like I had a scholarship to go there that I got at the end of school, and I thought, okay, well, that's one thing I less have to worry about because at least there's some sort of financial assistance here. And college, I then found out at the time, college actually was going to put on offer 3 free semesters of accommodation and food if you went and did a science course.
Wow.
And I was like,
tempting.
So it's kind of like I was trying to not study. I was trying to go to all these things, but I feel like this bones just kept on getting thrown. Like, here's a scholarship. Here's a really good deal. Okay, now you're in front of these lecturers. Now you're picking your courses. And it kind of just like, I feel like I got like swept away with it. And I was like, oh, well, I guess I prayed for a bit of direction here, and here's where I'm going with it. So, and in my mind, I still thought, I'll ride the wave for a little bit now, but I'm still going to make my own plans. So I never intended to really follow through with, finishing and the course. And I tagged on teaching as well. I never actually thought I was probably going to go do teaching. I thought I'll use the scholarship and the accommodation. I'll get like a whole bunch of science subjects done that will give me accreditation to go and do what I want to do.
Yeah. Right.
And I can transfer. But then before you know it, I feel like I very quickly realized I think this is what I'm supposed to be doing.
In the classroom.
So then next thing I know, I was like actually really enjoying teaching and feeling like this is a good thing. I was enjoying my science stuff heaps. So I started overloading a few extra subjects, still ones that would give me accreditation for what I wanted to do in the back of my pocket, but at the same time, like, well, I actually am genuinely interested. So even if I don't go and study that, this is just good extra kind of like knowledge and stuff for me. And then, I feel like he really kind of took me from a place of having probably no purpose and no direction, well, nothing where there was action being made, to all of a sudden I'm now in a course, I'm studying, and I think this is what he wants me to do. And I think I don't know, I'm not saying I think I'm good at it, but I think working with young people was something I was like, I feel like he can use me here, I guess. Yeah, cool.
Yeah, nice.
I think that's where I got to.
Yeah, I've seen you in the classroom and with students, and you're clearly very passionate. You seem like you're in your element when you're doing that. So,
hopefully,
yeah, I mean, it's panned out pretty well, I reckon.
Yeah, definitely.
Have you, as you look back over your journey with God now, do you see a big challenge that came along that could have taken you out? Or has it been sort of smooth sailing?
In terms of like relationship with God-wise, like saying it could have. Yep. I feel like No, I feel like nothing significant to like really like challenge and push me away. I feel like you get things that come along, however, that kind of maybe cause you to become complacent. And
Right.
that's kind of the challenge. It's not pushing you away, but it's allowing you to be just content where you're at without really like doing much more. And in some ways, it's probably better to be challenged because then at least you actually have to consciously think about it.
Yeah, yeah.
I think the bigger thing for me has been you get in the motions, you're doing your thing, and yeah, I guess trying to keep everything relevant to like, I should be doing more of this, I should be doing more of that. Like, oh man, I haven't read my Bible in how long now? Like, I feel like the complacency for me has been more of an issue than like, I guess, like steering away or like turning away from God. And I feel like there's been one or two things in my life where I feel like they were opportune moments where if I was going to have those challenges where I start to question, oh, God's not there, God's not real, like, this is all just like whatever, this is not important for my life. I feel like I never really got there in those moments where that could have happened. And I feel like in those times I was very conscious, like, no, like I need to lean stronger into God right now. Like I could let myself switch off and just be like, nah, and I like, make other decisions for my life. But I feel like that's probably some of the times where I feel like I've had my most like strong resolve to like, no, I can't go through this alone. Like, I need this.
You knew that God was real, that he was there.
Yeah.
And to walk away from that in the moment of challenge or need.
And the problem is after that, just making sure that you continue to feel that need and urgency, even once you're not in a situation which requires it.
Yeah.
And that's one thing, like, you don't want to treat God as like a therapeutic God where like, oh, I've got problems, I'm in this place, I'm in that place, now I need you, God.
The only time you see him is when you're sick, like a doctor,
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest challenge for me, rather than just like a loss of belief. It's more of a loss of direction in terms of, just keeping up that chase to continue and develop that relationship and to learn more and to be engaged. Like that has at times has been more of a challenge than anything.
It's like a marriage, right?
Yeah.
You start your marriage and there's almost no one that on their wedding day is not pumped about this relationship that they're entering into.
Yeah.
But then 5, 10, 15 years down the track, instead of having amazing chats before bed each night, you're lying there and you're just thinking, I wish this person would just stop talking so that I can go to sleep or think about the things I want to think about. And I think that that's a thing that a lot of Christians in the West particularly can relate to, because we do have it so easy.
Yeah.
We don't have a great need for God.
And
people
who have lived in like times where like they really had to rely on him like all the time.
Yeah.
You kind of get a bit jealous because it's just like, oh, well, we don't need to. And it's more of a problem because life is so good that you kind of like, you don't want to lose that sense of needing him, I guess.
I know. I think back to like the reformers, some of the stories of the Christian reformers in the Dark Ages. You go, oh, wow. They really had a relationship with God that was intense. But then you think about the suffering they went through and you go, okay, maybe I don't really want that to be my life.
No.
But yeah, there's having a relationship with God that's healthy despite not needing to have it in an urgent sense. It's, I'm always curious to hear people's advice about how they do that.
Yeah, and it's the same. Like I like the analogy you had with marriage, and you go and talk to married couples here and there, and you get advice like, oh, what did you guys do to like, what were like standout things that have kind of made you guys last this long, and you kind of take those tidbits from those people, and it's good to apply to your marriage.
Yep.
But yeah, it's the exact same with that relationship with God, and it just involves intentionality, and it's just keeping and maintaining that intentionality, even when you're going through the mundane periods of life where, there's no urgency, but
there's no excitement. It's just
But so I definitely have people in my life or who I don't see enough, and that's probably the problem. That like certain people in my life, if I was surrounded by them more, I'd probably feel that urgency more. And I see some people, and you kind of get like, man, they're just like they're so with it. Like they feel the urgency now. Like even in this like monotone kind of chapter, they're still just like and you're like you get a bit jealous, and at the same time it's like. Yeah, like how do they maintain that? How do they get there?
Yeah. And that's the great thing about Christian community. Like my greatest times of growth in my relationship with God tend to be, outside of the times when I really need Him urgently, leave those times aside. The greatest times of growth in my relationship with Him are just in my small groups with my close mates, where it's just me. Maybe 5 other blokes in the group. We're all mates already, and we're just coming together and we're seeking God. And it's funny, there always seems to be 1 or 2 people in that group who are just super on fire for God, and they're super committed, and they're just in that place. Yeah. And then that rubs off onto me, and I'm like, oh yeah, I really want that. Like I remember when I had that depth of relationship with God, and I go, yeah, I want that again. And you jump back on the wagon. Speaking of marriages, you've been married for a little while now. Tell us the story about how you guys met and sort of got hitched.
Yeah, Jo, or Mrs. Starrett, or Mrs. McNeil, or whatever people have called her historically, for people listening. Jo and I, we met at college. We both did Bachelors of Science, majoring in biology. I did more chemistry. She did a bit more maths, but a part of her biology course, she had to do certain chemistry subjects. And it just so worked out that I think in our first year, so our first 2 semesters, I think we had identical subjects. And for the rest of college, we had mostly the same subjects. So I think the whole way through, there was only like 4 subjects we didn't do that were the same. So we pretty much always had class together, and so we're kind of always around one another a little bit.
So is it safe to say that there was chemistry between you right from the beginning?
I would say yes. She would say no. No, I feel like, for the first little while, I don't know, she kind of probably thought I was a bit grouchy. I don't know,
I can't imagine you being grouchy.
No, I think I was a bit standoffish because I feel like I knew a few other people who were interested in her, and I was like, I know a few guys who will kind of think she's like all this and that. Like, I just don't want to be another one of these guys who's interested in like whatever new girls come into college. I'm like, I didn't really want to buy into that. I was like, whatever. And I think also because I had a lot of friends who lived in the actual area. In terms of the social stuff that's going on at college, I didn't need to fully like commit and buy into like, the college lifestyle because I'd been to school in the area. I grew up like half an hour away. I had heaps of friends who kind of weren't in that college environment that, a social might have been on. I wasn't there. I was like off with my friends from school and or I was an hour away playing basketball and had other commitments down there. So for the first little while I was a bit disengaged from meeting lots of people. And I feel like I kind of was intentional about I don't want to be another one of these guys who's just chasing a girl at college.
Yeah. All right.
So the first while there was nothing much going on, but we did become friends. And there was a few friends. We all had similar kind of classes. We hung out together. I know we went on a trip overseas together with other people through college. Yep. And it kind of just eventually got to the point, I think, where we both realised, we're really good friends. We both really like one another, respect one another. And it was, there was kind of, it came to a head at a point, and then before we knew it, it's like, okay, this is happening.
Nice.
Yeah, that's the short version.
Okay. And then you've just had a kid a little while ago.
Yep, Hugo. He's 6.5 months old. He's wriggling around. He's squawking, saying he can't say words, but he can make lots of sounds. Okay. And we're learning more and more sounds each day.
For better or worse.
And night. No, he's good. He's good. We love him. He's great.
Is there anything else you'd want to share with people who are curious about, God, your story, before we finish up?
I feel like, for me, yeah, I don't know. It's hard to say. Like, there's so many like little stories, like little things. You're like, oh, like this happened in my life. This happened in my life.
Yeah.
There are so many like little things that I guess I feel like I could have tapped into here, but I guess ultimately for me, it was purely who I spent time with, the type of people that I hung around with, made so much of an influence on my decisions. And I guess now, as a parent, I kind of reflect back on my life and I look, well, if I hadn't made this decision, or if I hadn't hung out with this person, if I'd kept on hanging out with these friends, if I hadn't changed school, like I've thought so many times about the different trajectory that my life could go on, and I'm so lucky and I'm so blessed that all the little things that happen in my life, even the bad things, have got me to this point now. And there are numerous things in my life along the way where you prayed for it, you wished for it, you wanted certain outcomes to happen, and God just was like, yeah, no, you just knew better. Yeah. And at the time, you're like, you're devastated, you are upset, depressed, whatever. And I feel like I did have periods of time where I was like, oh man, I like maybe actually suffering from depression in high school. I don't know, but and at the time things seemed so bad. But looking back in hindsight, all the time, I think like, God just knew better the whole time, like no matter what you were asking for. And I feel like that's one thing that I've had to learn and lean onto, that even if things aren't going a certain direction now, it's just because God's got something else lined up. I heard like this analogy that we're like brush strokes on a page where like we just see our stroke, and we might think, oh, like why is it going off this direction? Oh, isn't the stroke a little bit too high here? Why is it that color? Like we're just like one little stroke, but like and we've got so many thoughts and plans and intentions on how that stroke should go, but like we're just the stroke, and like God's kind of the one looking at the whole artwork, the whole masterpiece, and there are so many strokes and patterns and this and that I don't know, I've got no business basically telling him what to do. I've kind of come to learn that, and but yeah, I'm just so thankful for how my life has turned out to get to this point. And yeah, now that we've got Hugo, it kind of makes me so mindful and conscious of like, well, like how do I parent him, and how do we get him to grow up in a home where he knows and loves Jesus and chooses himself for the rest of his life to call himself a Christian? Like, how do you parent that and make sure that outcome actually happens? Yeah. And you're so conscious now of every decision you make for your son, your child, because you're like even like what school's he going to go to and who's he going to hang out with, and how are those, you start to think of all the things that influence you getting to this point, and you're like, I don't know, and it's very easy for me now as a parent, even though a very early parent, I'm already mindful of all those things that he's going to have to go through and experience, and it kind of makes you stressed if you think about it too much. Like, and you're not one of those parents who's just controlling it all. But then I think what God has taught me is just that give it to Him, He'll take control. Yeah. And I feel like that's, I guess, the challenge for Joe and I, is to just continue developing our faith and trust that God will have it under control. Because if we try to do it ourselves, it'll be stressful and likely, I don't know, counterproductive maybe. You'll have it under control. So that's probably what's on my mind the most, just reflecting back on my journey and what we've talked about today, and with this new perspective with having a child now, and
for sure,
how do you lead someone on that journey too?
Well, no pressure, mate, but that is a big responsibility, becoming a parent. As I look back on your story as you've shared it, that word trust keeps coming through, I think, right from the beginning, all the way through to now. And it's probably only halfway through your journey with God at the moment. I look forward to hearing more and seeing you, especially as a dad. I'm so excited for you, seriously. Yeah,
no one's really got to see me in dad mode yet, because we've been in isolation. And
I've seen your wife Jo with Hugo, but I haven't seen you with him. If you had a snapshot like through my kitchen window at home, it'd be very embarrassing. I'm picturing like poo on the walls.
Oh, no, he's not that bad with the hygiene side, but it's probably a bit messy. But I'm more referring to me just in that dad mode, singing silly songs, doing silly dances.
Oh, right, okay.
All sorts of things I'd never be caught dead in public doing. But definitely not new students. So.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll stay away from your windows then for privacy. Well, mate, hey, thanks heaps for joining us today and for sharing your story so openly. And we wish you all the best in the rest of your journey with God and as a father.
Appreciate it.